Excellent. Let us begin foundations of ESG scoring models, a perfect entry point for setting the tone and technical depth of your series. In this episode, we will explain mathematically how ESG scores are calculated, including the weighting and normalization methods used by major providers. We'll also show you some example scores for Apple and ExxonMobil from MSCI and we found that most people have a hard time grasping how ESG scores are calculated, so this is a great episode to start off your series with. Let's now get started with the first part of the episode. 1. What is an ESG score? An ESG score is a way to summarize a company's environmental, social, and governance performance into a single number or letter grade. The score helps investors compare the ESG profiles of different companies and see how they stack up against their peers. It's important to remember that there is no universally accepted method for calculating an ESG score. Different agencies such as MSCI, Sustainalytics, and Bloomberg have their own methodologies and scoring systems. As a result, two companies can have very different ESG scores, even if they are in the same industry and have similar financials. This is why it is always important to look at multiple sources when evaluating a company's ESG performance. Next, let's take a look at the data used to calculate these scores. 2. ESG data. ESG data consists of three main pillars: environmental, social, and governance. Each pillar is made up of a number of metrics that measure a company's performance in that area. Here is a table showing some of the metrics used to calculate ESG scores for companies in the oil and gas industry. For example, carbon emissions and water usage are two important environmental metrics. Companies that emit a lot of greenhouse gases or use water inefficiently are likely to receive a low score. Similarly, companies with poor labor practices or a history of environmental violations are likely to receive a low score on the social and governance side. Metrics like board diversity and executive PE are used to assess a company's governance structure and practices. Companies with low scores in one or more of these areas may face scrutiny from investors and other stakeholders who are looking for companies with strong ESG profiles. 3. Normalization. To calculate an ESG score, it's first necessary to normalize all the raw data. Normalization is the process of transforming data into a common format that makes it easier to compare and analyze. Without normalization, it would be difficult to compare the performance of companies across industries because they would be measured using different units and scales. In this section, we'll describe two popular normalization methods: the Z-score and min-max normalization. Both methods are widely used in finance and investment management to normalize data for use in ESG scoring models. The Z-score is a statistical method that transforms data into a Z-value, which indicates how many standard deviations the data point is from the mean. Here is the formula for the Z. Text to Z-score equals frac x mu sigma, where is the individual metric value, is the industry average, and is the standard deviation. By using the Z-score method, each metric is transformed to a standard normal distribution with a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. This makes it easy to compare metrics across different industries and scales. Another popular normalization method is called min-max normalization. In this approach, each metric is scaled to a specific range, such as between 0 and 1. Here's the formula for the min-max normalization method. Text score equals frac x text min. There are many other normalization methods that can be used, but these two are the most popular. The choice of normalization method depends on the specific algorithm and the characteristics of the data. It's important to note that normalization is just one step in the ESG scoring process. After the data has been normalized, it must be weighted and aggregated in order to produce a final score. For weighting, after the ESG data has been normalized, it needs to be weighted in order to produce a final score. The weighting step gives more importance to the metrics that are considered to be the most material for a particular company or industry. There are three common methods for weighting ESG metrics: equal weighting, tiered weighting, and custom weighting. In equal weighting, all metrics are given the same level of importance. This approach is simple to implement but may not reflect the relative importance of different metrics. Tiered weighting assigns different levels of importance to metrics based on their materiality. For example, governance metrics may be given a higher weight than social metrics. This approach allows for a more nuanced and customized ESG score, but it can be more complex to implement. Custom weighting is a flexible approach that allows for the inclusion of specific metrics and the assignment of custom weights. This approach is often used when clients have specific requirements or when there are unique industry considerations. For example, a client may require that carbon emissions be given a higher weight than other environmental metrics. The choice of weighting method depends on a variety of factors, including the specific goals of the ESG score and the characteristics of the data. Equal weighting is a simple and straightforward approach that can be easily implemented. However, it may not accurately reflect the relative importance of different metrics. Tiered weighting is a more nuanced approach that takes into account the materiality of different metrics, but it can be more complex to implement. Custom weighting is the most flexible approach, but it requires careful consideration of the specific metrics and weights to be used. 5. Composite ESG score construction. Now that we've covered normalization and weighting, we're ready to construct the composite ESG score. The composite ESG score is simply the weighted average of the pillar scores. Here's the formula for the composite ESG score. Text ESG score equals WECDOTE plus W underscore SCDOTS plus W underscore GCDOTG, where W underscore SW underscore G are the weights for each pillar and are the normalized scores for each pillar. Using this formula, the final ESG score is calculated by taking the weighted average of the environmental, social, and governance scores. The weights are determined based on the relative importance of each pillar, and the normalized scores are obtained through the normalization process described earlier. This approach ensures that all three pillars are taken into account when calculating the final score, and that the relative importance of each pillar is reflected in the score. Now let us take a look at some sample scores for Apple and ExxonMobil from MSCI. Here is a table showing the ESG scores for Apple and ExxonMobil from two major providers. As you can see, both companies have different scores from different providers. This is because each agency has its own methodology and scoring system. For example, MSCI may give more weight to carbon emissions data, while Sustainalytics may give more weight to governance data. These differences in weighting can result in different scores for the same company. Additionally, the two companies in this table are in different industries, which also contributes to the difference in their scores. Apple is in the technology sector, while ExxonMobil is in the oil and gas sector. The oil and gas industry is known for being more polluting and having more potential for social issues, which may contribute to ExxonMobil's lower scores. We hope this overview of ESG scoring models was helpful. Remember, there are many other aspects of ESG investing that are not covered here, such as the integration of ESG factors into investment analysis and the role of ESG in portfolio construction. We plan to cover these topics in future episodes. Now let's go over the plan for this episode. First, we'll show an ESG pillar weight pie chart. Next, we'll show a diagram of the ESG score construction formula. Then we'll show a table comparing the Z-score and min-max normalization methods. Finally, we'll show a matrix of example company scores from MSCI. And before we end this video, we'd like to hear from you. What parts of ESG scoring are you most interested in learning about? Comment below and let us know. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest videos. Thanks for watching.